The garage had always smelled of oil and steel, even after decades. Some things just settled into concrete. Like regrets. Like routine. Tom wiped his hands on the same rag he'd used all week and leaned against the workbench, staring at the busted carburetor like it owed him an answer. Outside, the Oklahoma heat was already kicking up dust, even though it wasn't noon. Jane had packed him lunch that morning. Egg salad sandwiches, still warm in the paper bag. She'd kissed him on the cheek, too, like nothing ever happened. Like the last year hadn't split his life clean in half. He hadn't told her he'd be meeting Rick tomorrow. That damn meeting had been circling him like a buzzard for weeks. Renew the contract and keep the business afloat, or cut ties with the man who'd shared his table and his wife. Tom hadn't hit Rick. Not when he found out. Not when Jane confessed. Not even when Rick showed up at the garage to talk, hands raised like a preacher. He just walked out and drove until the gas light came on. He never told anyone where he went that night. Still didn't know what made him come back. He did come back, though. Jane cried. Said it was a mistake. Said Rick meant nothing. Tom wasn't sure if he believed her then, or if he was just too tired to throw the whole thing away. People like them didn't get to start over at 58. They patched things, stayed in the same house, had the same dinners. But something inside him never came home. Now Rick wanted another 3-year deal. The numbers were good. Damn good. But every time Tom looked at the proposal, he saw Rick smirk, half hidden behind a handshake. Saw Jane's face the night she confessed, pale and still, like she wanted him to decide who she was now. He picked up the lunch bag, considered it, then tossed it onto the passenger seat of his truck. The road stretched wide and hot, but he didn't start the engine. Just sat there, watching the heat shimmer off the hood, thinking about all the things they'd chosen not to talk about. The way Jane stopped humming while cooking. The way he stopped leaving his tools in the kitchen drawer. The quiet war of pretending. He could sign the contract and keep everything running like it always had. Customers wouldn't know. Bills would get paid. Jane would keep setting the table for two. Or he could tear it up and walk away from what was left of the old life. Burn the bridge clean. Tom reached into the glove box and pulled out the envelope. Rick's revised terms. He didn't open it. Just stared at his own name typed across the front in neat, emotionless font. Like a verdict waiting to be read aloud. He thought about the first time he met Rick. Back when they still talked about engines like they were sacred machines. Back when Jane used to laugh louder. Back before the soft corrosion of years and silence and compromise. Back before the shame of knowing someone else had looked at your wife the way you used to. Something buzzed on the dashboard, his phone. Jane. He let it ring. No voicemail. No message. Probably checking if he'd eaten. Probably pretending everything was fine. Tom looked out across the parking lot. A man his age was loading bags of soil into a pickup, sweat bleeding through his shirt. Another guy limped toward the diner with a cane and a newspaper. Everyone moving forward like the past didn't drag behind them. He turned the key but didn't drive off. Just sat, engine running, thinking. The road wasn't going anywhere. But maybe he was. The gas station sat at the edge of town, where the highway peeled away from the hills and stretched flat into dust. Tom wasn't planning to stop, but the heat had dried out his throat, and the coffee from the garage sat sour in his gut. He pulled in, engine humming low, and parked near the ice machine. The girl was sitting on a folding chair just beyond the pumps, a beat-up sketch pad balanced on her knees. A cardboard sign leaned against a crate beside her. $2 portraits. Help my mom. She couldn't have been older than 10. Skinny arms, scuffed tennis shoes, a high ponytail that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. Tom didn't look at her twice at first. He headed inside, grabbed a bottle of water, and paid in silence. But when he came back out, the girl looked up and met his gaze. Not like a kid begging for change. More like someone who already knew something about him. Want your portrait? She asked, lifting the pad a little. Her voice was clear, steady, not what he expected. He almost said no, almost kept walking. But something about the way she sat there, alone, calm, like she wasn't waiting for kindness, made him pause. You hungry? He asked instead. She shrugged. Sometimes. He hesitated, then reached into the truck and grabbed the lunch bag. Sandwiches. Homemade. She took the bag and set it on her lap. Didn't open it. Just ran her fingers along the paper slowly. Then she looked up again, her eyes too serious for her age. You shouldn't eat them, she said. Not today. Tom blinked. What? She pointed to the sandwiches. They're not good for you. Not today. And don't drink anything they hand you. Not till you're home. Something in her voice, quiet but firm, sent a shiver down his back. He almost laughed it off, almost said, You some kind of fortune teller? But he didn't. She picked up her pencil and started to sketch. Sometimes I just know things. I don't know why. Tom watched her draw in silence. A soft wind kicked up dust around the pumps. Somewhere behind the station, a dog barked once and went quiet. He looked down at the lunch bag, then back at the girl. You saying someone's gonna try to hurt me? He asked. She didn't stop drawing. I just said what I felt. He stood there, not knowing what to say. Then her words hooked onto something he hadn't thought about in years. A story Rick told, back when they first went into business together, about how he'd closed his first deal with a guy who ended up losing everything. Rick had laughed then, said, Water's water, right? Until it's not. Tom hadn't thought much of it back then. But now, he looked at the girl again. She'd finished the sketch. It was him, rough and simple, but there was something in the eyes that unsettled him. Like she'd caught a part of him he didn't even recognize. What's your name? He asked. Ellie. Well, Ellie, you got a gift. She nodded. People say that. Sometimes they don't like what I draw. He took the portrait, folded it, and slid it into his pocket without looking again. You got someone waiting on you. My mom. She's home. Can't walk much since last year. Tom paused. The truck engine ticked in the heat. The bag of sandwiches felt heavy in his hand. I'll take these, he said quietly. Might get them looked at. Ellie didn't argue, just gave a small nod and looked back down at her pad. Tom got into his truck and closed the door gently. For a moment, he didn't move, just sat there, both hands on the wheel, pulse knocking in his throat. She might have been wrong. Probably was. But the idea had taken root, and it was growing fast. The cafe was one of those places pretending to be fancier than it was. Polished concrete floors, chalkboard menu, and fiddle-leaf figs wilting in the corners. Thomas pushed open the door and scanned the room until he saw Rick in the far booth, already pouring something from a small ceramic pot. Chamomile, Rick called with a grin. Figured you'd want to keep your nerves steady. Tom slid into the booth without smiling. Rick's assistant, Kyle, young, quiet, too slick for his own good, nodded politely from across the table. The steam rising from the cups curled in lazy spirals. I'm good, Tom said, setting the folded contract on the table. Let's get to it. Rick leaned back, feigning ease. No rush. We've got time. Tom didn't answer. His eyes drifted to the teapot. The bag of sandwiches Ellie had refused lay sealed in the glove box of his truck. Now, the same warning voice echoed in his mind. Don't drink anything they give you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small bottle of water, unscrewed the cap, and took a long, deliberate sip. Rick's eyes twitched. Barely, but enough. You all right? Rick asked. Just thirsty. Tom's voice was even. Didn't sleep much. Rick chuckled. That wife of yours still keeping you on edge? Tom didn't reply. Instead, he opened the folder and pushed the papers forward. You changed the revenue split. Kyle stiffened. Rick cleared his throat. Only slightly. You've been getting more than your share for a while. That wasn't your call. Rick shrugged. We're just adjusting to the market. Tom looked at him, really looked this time. Beneath the tan and polished teeth, Rick looked tired. Thin lines at the eyes. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. I'm not signing this, Tom said. Tom, Rick's tone hardened. You do this now. You throw away 20 years. Tom reached for the cup in front of him. Mind if I take this with me? Rick blinked. What? The tea. Tom lifted the cup and held it under his nose. The scent was weak, floral. Might have it tested. Kyle froze. Rick's jaw tightened. Tom, come on, Rick said, trying to laugh. What the hell are you talking about? Tom's voice stayed level. Nothing. Just curious. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a plastic bag, and sealed the cup inside, careful not to spill a drop. Neither of them spoke. A low hum from the ceiling fan was the only sound in the booth. Rick stood, hands flat on the table. You think I'd poison you over a contract? Tom stood too. I think I don't know what you do anymore. As he turned to leave, Cal muttered something under his breath. Rick didn't stop him. Outside, the sky had gone pale with heat. Tom walked back to the truck slowly, feeling the sweat trickle down his back. He sat behind the wheel, exhaled once, and let the silence settle. The phone rang 10 minutes later. It was Charlie from the office. She's gone, he said. Jane. She cleared out her desk. Took some documents. Safe was open. Tom didn't ask what was missing. He already knew. Back inside the cafe, Rick's booth sat empty. But from the window, Tom could see him pacing the sidewalk, phone to his ear, face red, arms sharp in motion. Cal stood a few feet back, expressionless. Tom didn't start the engine right away. He just watched. The pieces were shifting now. Quietly, but for good. The sun was starting to sink by the time Tom pulled into the gas station again. The girl wasn't there. Just the folding chair, empty now, legs uneven on the cracked pavement. He got out slowly, stretched his back, and stood for a moment, not sure what he was even doing there. Maybe it was just habit. Maybe it was guilt. He was halfway back to the truck when he saw her. Ellie, coming around the corner with a plastic bag of canned food, dragging slightly behind her. She looked surprised to see him. Hey, she said. You came back. Tom nodded. Figured I owed you some thanks. Ellie tilted her head. For not eating lunch. For a little more than that. They stood in silence for a beat. Then he asked, How's your mom doing? She's okay. Kind of. Hurts a lot. But she smiles through it. You live around here? Not really. She looked up at him, like deciding whether to trust him. We're over by the old paper mill, past the church with the blue roof. He remembered that stretch of road. Narrow, full of potholes and rusted mailboxes. I can give you a ride, he said. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. The ride was quiet at first. The air smelled of hot vinyl and road dust. Ellie clutched the bag on her lap like it might slip away. You draw a lot? Tom asked, just to break the silence. Every day. Where'd you learn? No one taught me. It just kind of comes out. Tom glanced over at her. There was something about her profile, something familiar in the curve of her cheek, the way her eyebrows arched when she was thinking. You said your mom's name was Emily? Yeah. The name hit harder than he expected. It had been 20 years, maybe more, since he last heard it spoken that way. And he hadn't thought about her in just as long. At least, that's what he told himself. Was she from around here? He asked, already knowing the answer. She used to live in Tulsa. Moved a bunch before we ended up here. His hands tightened on the wheel. They turned off the main road, past fields gone wild with weeds, down into a neighborhood where houses leaned too far to one side and fences had given up the fight. She pointed to a small beige house with a sagging porch. That one. He parked on the street. For a second, he didn't move. You all right? She asked. He nodded, even though he wasn't. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. It was clean, tired, but clean. The living room was small, filled with second-hand furniture and stacks of books that looked too well-read. A soft voice called from the back. Ellie. Yeah, Mom. I'm home. Tom followed her into the kitchen. The woman standing at the counter turned slowly. Her hair was tied back, loose strands framing a face that time hadn't been gentle to, but hadn't ruined either. She froze when she saw him. He spoke first. Emily. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Just the flicker of recognition, of disbelief. Tom felt the years land all at once. The ones they'd lived apart, the ones he ran from. I didn't know, he said. She blinked. Didn't know what? Any of this. Her. You. Emily looked past him to her daughter, who was already retreating to her bedroom. careful not to interrupt whatever this was. Tom wanted to ask so many things, but all he managed was, "What happened?" Emily sat, slow and stiff. "A truck ran a stop sign last year. Spine took the worst of it. I walk on good days. On others, not so much." He nodded. "I'm sorry." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that carries too much history. Then she said, without looking at him, "You always were good at running, Tom." He didn't argue. He had been. But this time, he'd turned around. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and worn leather. Tom sat with his elbows on his knees, watching the second hand on the wall clock tick its slow, judgmental rhythm. Emily was in the back with Dr. Hughes, a man Tom hadn't seen since college. A surgeon now, with grayer hair and the same deadpan honesty that once got them both kicked out of a bar in Amarillo. He wasn't sure what made him call Hughes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the way Emily winced when she reached for the teapot. Or maybe it was Ellie's silence in the car, the way she stared out the window like she'd learned to keep her questions to herself. The door opened. Hughes stepped out, clipboard in hand, and motioned for Tom to follow him down the hall. They stopped near a row of closed doors. "The air back here was colder, cleaner." "She's stable," Hughes said. "But not great." Whoever handled the first two surgeries didn't know what the hell they were doing. Tom didn't answer, just waited. "There's compression on the lower spine," Hughes continued. "Some of it's reversible. Some damage is permanent if we don't move fast. So what now? I'll operate. But the recovery'll be slow. She'll need support. Rehab. Stability. I'll cover it," Tom said too quickly. Hughes looked up from the chart. "She your wife?" "No." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" Tom hesitated. "She used to be someone I loved. Long time ago." Hughes tapped the clipboard once, then said quietly, "The girl. Ellie. She yours?" Tom's throat tightened. "I don't know. She looks like you. The way she stands. Same scowl when she's thinking." A pause. "You might want to find out." Tom stood there for a long moment after Hughes left. The walls hummed with fluorescent light. He didn't know what he was supposed to feel. Relief? Panic? Regret? When he walked back into Emily's room, she was sitting up, pale but composed. She looked at him without surprise. "You heard?" she asked. "Yeah. You didn't have to do all this." He shook his head. "I wanted to." She studied his face, like trying to read a language she hadn't spoken in years. "You're not the man I remember." "Neither are you." That made her smile, just a little. Later, in the hallway, Ellie was waiting with a book half open in her lap. She looked up as he approached. "She's okay," he said softly. Ellie nodded. "She said you used to know her." "I did. She also said you might be my dad." The words landed without drama, just a fact placed gently in the space between them. Tom sat beside her. "I didn't know. Not until today." "Do you want to be?" He turned to look at her. "That's not something you get to want. That's something you try to earn." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Mom never said bad things about you. Just that you left." "I did. But you came back." Tom looked at her hands, small, restless, ink-stained from her sketches. "Yeah," he said. "I guess I finally did." The first time Emily stood on her own again, she cried. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying people write about in books. Just a quiet breaking behind her eyes as her feet touched the floor and stayed there. Tom stood across the room, pretending not to notice, his hands in his pockets, like she might fall, and he didn't trust himself not to rush in. It had been 6 weeks since the surgery. Rehab was slow, painful, but Emily was stubborn in that quiet, determined way he remembered from long ago. The same way she used to cross her arms when arguing about which highway to take on road trips. Now, she faced physical therapy with the same grit, jaw tight, eyes steady. Ellie was a fixture at the clinic. She brought her sketchpad everywhere, filling page after page with drawings of elevators, wheelchairs, nurses' shoes. She rarely spoke while she drew, but when she looked up, her eyes always found Tom's first. Like she was checking if he was still there. He always was. One morning, after Emily's session, Tom took Ellie to a diner near the rehab center. They sat in a booth by the window. The waitress brought them pancakes and didn't ask questions. Ellie drew the syrup bottle. "Mom says you sold the garage," she said, not looking up. "I did." "Why?" He sipped his coffee. "Didn't need it anymore." She raised an eyebrow. So much like her mother, it knocked the wind out of him. People don't just quit after 30 years. They do when they find something worth more than what they had. She stared at him, then turned back to her sketchbook. "So are you staying?" Tom leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I got a small house 10 minutes from yours. Quiet street. Big enough for two if someone ever wanted to visit." Ellie didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I like quiet streets." They finished breakfast without another word about it. Emily's progress kept surprising everyone but her. She moved from Walker to Kane, then from Kane to stubborn independence. The house was still too small, too crooked, but it felt different now. There were more voices inside it. More dinners at the same table. More dishes drying on the rack. One evening, Tom was fixing a loose board on the back porch when Emily stepped outside and leaned on the railing beside him. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "I know, but you did." He looked at her. The years had changed them both, worn away the shine, carved new shapes in their edges. But some things had survived. "I've got more years behind me than ahead," he said. "Might as well spend them where they matter." Emily reached for his hand and didn't let go. Inside, Ellie was humming to herself, lost in a new drawing. The porch light flickered on as the sun dipped low, and for the first time in a long time, Tom didn't feel like he was standing in the ruins of old mistakes. He felt like he was home. And home, he'd learned, wasn't a place you found. It was one you chose to build.